Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UEF dreadnought Retribution, his weathered hands gripping the metal railing as he stared at the holographic display. The weak signal flickered in and out like a dying heartbeat. 3 hours ago. This desperate message had crossed thousands of light years to reach them. The transmission was barely audible now. Static filled most of it, but Jake could still make out the alien voices pleading for help. Their ship, the Peaceful Dawn, was floating dead in space, somewhere in the outer rim. The Villani were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful farmers and traders. They had never hurt anyone. Now, they were dying. "Sir, we're the only ones responding to their SOS," Lieutenant Amy Richards called out from her station. Her fingers danced across the communication controls, checking and rechecking the galactic emergency channels. "I've been monitoring all frequencies. Not a single other ship has changed course to help them." Jake felt his jaw muscles tighten. This was typical. The galaxy was full of so-called civilized species, but when it came time to actually help someone, they all found excuses. Too far away, too dangerous, not profitable enough. The same old story every time. The bridge crew worked quietly around him. These were good people, Jake thought. They had families back on Earth, lives they could be living instead of floating through the darkness of space. But here they were, ready to risk everything for strangers they had never met. "How long until we reach them, Tom?" Jake asked, turning to navigator Tom Bradley. Tom looked up from his charts, his young face serious. 67 hours at maximum burn, sir. That's pushing our engines to the limit, but we can do it." Jake shook his head. 67 hours might as well be forever for people running out of air. Every minute counted now. Every second could mean the difference between life and death for hundreds of innocent civilians. "Make it 60, he ordered. "I don't care if you have to strap rockets to the hull. Those people don't have time for a leisurely cruise." Tom nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'll talk to Chief Engineer Pete Wilson right away. We'll find those extra 7 hours somehow." As Tom hurried off the bridge, Jake turned back to the display. The Villani distress signal was getting weaker by the minute. Soon, it would fade entirely, leaving only silence in the dark. He wondered how many of them were still alive. How many children were on that ship, looking to their parents with frightened eyes as the air grew thin. Amy cleared her throat softly. "Sir, I keep thinking about this. Why aren't the other species helping? The Centaurians have ships closer than us. So do the Rituelians. They could reach the Peaceful Dawn in half the time." Jake had been wondering the same thing. The answer wasn't pretty, but it was simple. Because they don't care. Amy. Oh, they'll give speeches about galactic cooperation and universal brotherhood. They'll sign treaties and attend conferences. But when someone actually needs help, really needs it, they find reasons to look the other way. The lieutenant frowned. "That's terrible, sir." "It is," Jake agreed. "But it's also why we're out here. Someone has to be willing to do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs us something. That's what makes us human, I suppose." Behind them, the massive engines of the Retribution began to hum with increased power. Chief Wilson had found those extra hours somehow, just as Jake knew he would. The ship shuddered slightly as they pushed beyond normal operating limits, racing through space toward an uncertain rescue mission. Jake looked around at his crew. They were scared, he could tell. This wasn't a routine patrol or a diplomatic mission. They were flying into the unknown to save strangers who might already be dead. But not one of them had hesitated when the order came. Not one had suggested they let someone else handle it. That was humanity for you, he thought with quiet pride. When the chips were down and lives hung in the balance, they didn't run calculations or weigh profits. They just acted. Captain Lisa Harper felt her stomach drop as the Swift Justice emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. She had been hoping to find a simple mechanical failure, maybe some engine trouble or a power core malfunction. Something her small scout ship could help with until the main fleet arrived. Instead, what appeared on her tactical display made her blood turn to ice. "Ma'am, the Volani ship. It's been disabled deliberately," Sensor Operator Mike Davis reported, his voice tight with anger. His fingers flew across his console, double-checking the readings. Energy signatures match, Corvin Raider weapons, plasma cannons, hull breakers, the whole package. Lisa stared at the view screen in horror. The peaceful Dawn hung motionless in space, dark scorch marks covering its hull where weapons had burned through the metal. Pieces of debris floated around it like a cloud of death. But that wasn't the worst part. Through the darkness, she could see them Corvin ships, circling the crippled colony vessel like a pack of wolves around wounded prey. Their sleek black hulls reflected no light, making them look like holes cut out of space itself. There were at least 20 of them, maybe more, hiding in the shadows. "Those bastards," whispered Communications Officer Beth Turner from her station. "They didn't just find the Volani by accident. They hunted them down." Lisa nodded grimly. The Corvins were known throughout this sector of space as the worst kind of predators. They didn't fight fair battles against military ships or raid cargo vessels for profit. No, they specialized in something much more evil. They hunted refugee ships, civilian transports, anyone who couldn't fight back. They would disable a ship just enough to keep it from escaping, then take their time picking it apart, like scavengers. "What are they doing to the survivors?" Mike asked, adjusting his sensors to get a better look. Lisa studied the tactical display more carefully. The Corvin ships weren't attacking anymore. They were just waiting, moving in slow circles around their victim like sharks who had already tasted blood. Some of the smaller raider craft had attached themselves to the peaceful Dawn's hull, like parasites. "They're boarding her," Lisa realized, with growing horror, taking their time to strip everything valuable before the crew dies. People, technology, anything they can sell. Beth's hands shook as she worked her controls. "Captain, I'm picking up some weak life signs from the Volani ship. There are still people alive in there." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. Somewhere inside that floating tomb, innocent civilians were fighting for every breath while raiders picked through their belongings. Families huddled together in dark corridors, wondering if help would ever come. Children crying as the air grew thin and cold. "How long before Admiral Morrison gets here with the main fleet?" Lisa asked. Mike checked his calculations. "At least 50 hours, ma'am. Maybe more if they run into any problems." 50 hours. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, trying to push down the rage building in her chest. The Volani didn't have 50 hours. From the look of their ship, they probably had less than 10 hours of air left, and every minute they waited, more of them would die, while the Corvins leisurely went about their business. "Ma'am," Beth said quietly, "what do we do? We're just a scout ship. 3 crew members and some sensors. Those are full battle cruisers out there." Lisa looked at her small crew. Beth was barely 25, fresh out of the academy. Mike had a wife and 2 kids back on Earth. They had signed up to explore space and gather information, not fight. Impossible battles against overwhelming odds. But they were human. And humans didn't abandon people who needed help, no matter what the cost. "Get me Admiral Morrison on the Retribution," Lisa ordered, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "Tell him we've got company, and they're not the friendly type. Send him everything we're seeing here." As Beth worked to establish the long-range communication link, Lisa continued studying the enemy formation. 20 Corvin ships against 1 human scout vessel. The odds were impossible. But maybe, just maybe, they could buy some time for the people trapped inside that dying ship. Admiral Jake Morrison stood rigid on the bridge of the Retribution as the incoming transmission crackled through the speakers. The mechanical voice of the universal translator made the alien words sound even more cold and heartless than they probably were in the original language. "Human vessel, You may claim 20% of salvage if you withdraw now. This prey belongs to us. Jake felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. Salvage. They were talking about the Volani survivors like they were scrap metal to be divided up and sold. Behind him, he could hear his bridge crew shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The anger in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Standing beside him, his executive officer, Colonel Rachel Stone, shook her head in pure disgust. Her face had gone pale with fury. They think we're here for profit, sir. They actually believe we came all this way just to get a piece of their sick business. Jake had seen a lot of evil in his 30 years of military service, but this was something special. The Corvins weren't just raiders or pirates. They were something far worse. They saw other living beings as nothing more than resources to be harvested. The idea that humans might have come to actually help the Volani was so foreign to them that they couldn't even consider it. Sir, Communications Officer Danny Walsh called out from his station. I'm getting more transmissions from their fleet. They're arguing about how to split up the survivors between their ships. The words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. While they stood here talking, people were dying inside that crippled colony ship. Innocent families who had done nothing wrong except trust that the galaxy was a safer place than it really was. Jake walked over to the main communications console and placed his hand on the transmit button. The bridge fell completely silent. Every person there knew that what happened in the next few moments would decide whether hundreds of civilians lived or died. This is Admiral Morrison of the United Earth Fleet, Jake said, his voice carrying across space to the Corvin raiders. You have 30 seconds to move away from that civilian vessel and surrender, or we will consider you hostile. The response came back almost immediately. First there was a strange chittering sound that the translator couldn't process. Then Jake realized what it was. The Corvins were laughing. The alien commander's voice came through the speakers again, still amused. Human, you are one ship. We are many. Your species is new to this part of space. You do not understand how things work here. The weak feed the strong. This is the natural order. More laughter from the other Corvin ships joined in. They found the whole situation hilarious. A single human warship trying to threaten an entire raider fleet. To them, it was like a mouse challenging a pack of wolves. Colonel Stone stepped closer. To Jake. Sir, they have no idea what they're dealing with, do they? Jake smiled for the first time since receiving Captain Harper's initial report. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of expression that had made enemies of Earth think twice about their plans for the past 50 years. No, Rachel. They really don't. The Corvin commander was still talking, his mechanical voice droning on about human stupidity and the harsh realities of space. But Jake wasn't listening anymore. He had heard enough. These creatures had made their choice when they decided to hunt civilians. They had sealed their fate when they laughed at his warning. Jake turned to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Commander Roy Patterson. Roy, are all weapon systems online and ready? Yes, sir. All batteries charged and ready to fire on your command. Good. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women had families back on Earth. They had hopes and dreams and futures ahead of them. But they were here, ready to fight impossible odds, because it was the right thing to do. Helm, take us in. All ships, battle formation. It's time to show these raiders what happens when you prey on the innocent. The laughter from the Corvin fleet died as the human warships began moving toward them, weapon systems powering up like awakening dragons. Too late, they realized their mistake. What happened next would be talked about in hushed whispers across the galaxy for years to come. The moment the human fleet moved into attack formation, everything changed. The Retribution and her escort, destroyers Vengeance and Fury, moved through space like predators who had finally found their prey. The Corvins had made a fatal mistake. They thought humans were like every other species in the galaxy, cautious, careful, always looking for the easy way out. They had no idea they were facing a race that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. Lieutenant Commander Steve Wilson sat at his weapons control station, his hands steady on the targeting controls. Around him, the bridge hummed, with deadly purpose. Every screen showed enemy positions. Every system was primed for battle. First target locked, sir, Steve reported to Admiral Morrison. Corvin heavy cruiser, range 4,000 kilometers. Fire when ready, Jake ordered. Steve's finger pressed the firing stud. The Retribution's main railgun spoke with a voice like thunder. The projectile accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, crossed the distance between ships in less than a second. The Corvin cruiser's shields, designed to stop energy weapons and slow missiles, might as well have been made of tissue paper. The tungsten slug punched through the enemy's shields, through their armor, and out the other side of the ship. For a moment, the Corvin vessel hung in space, looking undamaged. Then it split apart like a broken toy, atmosphere and debris streaming out into the void. Target destroyed, sir, Steve announced calmly, moving to next hostile. The other Corvin ships finally understood what they were facing. These weren't the usual aliens they bullied and robbed. These were apex predators, and the hunt was on, but it was already too late. The human destroyers' vengeance and fury had flanked the raider formation, their own weapons systems cutting through enemy ships like hot knives through butter. Captain Roy Mitchell on the Vengeance watched his tactical display with professional satisfaction as another Corvin raider simply vanished in a ball of fire. These guys really thought their little energy shields would stop us. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Dan Cooper, said with dark amusement, "Somebody forgot to tell them that humans have been building ship-killing weapons for 300 years. Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Harper's small scout ship, Swift Justice, danced between the larger vessels like a deadly mosquito. Her ship wasn't built for heavy combat, but it was fast and smart. And right now, that was enough. Torpedo tubes loaded and ready. Her weapons specialist, Petty Officer Gary Young, reported from his cramped station. Fire at will, Lisa ordered. The Swift Justice's torpedo tubes spoke with quiet precision. The small but deadly missiles streaked toward a Corvin boarding ship that was still attached to the Villani colony vessel. The torpedo struck perfectly, separating the raider from its victim without damaging the civilian ship. Around them, the battle raged with terrible efficiency. This wasn't really a battle at all, it was an execution. The human ships moved with a coordination that spoke of years of training and centuries of warfare. Every shot counted. Every move had a purpose. The Corvins tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for terrorizing helpless civilians, not fighting real warships. Their plasma cannons and energy beams splashed harmlessly off human armor plating. Their missiles were swatted out of space by point defense systems that had been tested against much more dangerous threats. Lieutenant Commander Wilson continued his deadly work, methodically destroying one enemy ship after another. Another cruiser. Down, sir. That's 7 confirmed kills from our main batteries alone. Around the battlefield, the story was the same. The Vengeance and Fury had carved through half the Corvin fleet between them. Even little Swift Justice had claimed 3 kills with her. Precise torpedo work. Some of the raiders tried to run, their commanders finally understanding that they had picked a fight with the wrong species. But human ships were faster, and human weapons had longer range. There was nowhere to hide in the empty darkness of space. Within 37 minutes, it was over. The Corvin fleet existed only as expanding clouds of debris and emergency beacons that would broadcast their final moments to an empty universe. Not one human ship had taken serious damage. The predators had become prey, and the galaxy's newest apex species had just announced their arrival. The rescue operation was already underway as the last pieces of Corvin ships drifted silently through space. Human medical shuttles moved carefully through the debris field, their pilots expertly navigating around chunks of twisted metal to reach the crippled Villani colony ship. The peaceful Dawn looked like a wounded animal, but she was still alive. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in his private, ready room, watching the rescue efforts through the large viewing window. Behind him, Dr. Jennifer Walsh had just finished her initial medical report. The fleet's chief medical officer looked tired but relieved as she set down her tablet. "How many survivors?" Jake asked, without turning around. 340, Jennifer replied. "Out of nearly 500 who started the journey. We lost some during the initial Corvin attack, and more died while they were waiting for rescue. But the ones we got, they're going to make it." Jake nodded slowly. 347 lives saved. It was a good number, but he couldn't stop thinking about the 150 who didn't make it. Families torn apart by raiders who saw other beings as nothing more than cargo to be sold. "The Villani are calling us saviors," Jennifer continued, moving to stand beside him at the window. "I've never seen anything like it, Admiral. They're crying, praying, trying to give us their most precious belongings as gifts. Some of the elders want to erect monuments to human heroism when they reach their new colony." Through the window, they could see one of the medical shuttles docking with the hospital ship, Mercy. The small craft was packed with Villani survivors, their strange blue skin and large eyes making them look almost childlike in their relief. Many of them had never seen a human before today, but they already understood that these strange bipeds had crossed the galaxy to save them. Jake watched a human medic carefully helping an injured Villani child out of the shuttle. The little alien clung to the medic's uniform, too scared to let go of the person who had pulled him from the darkness of his dying ship. "They want to call us heroes," Jake said quietly. "But heroes don't do what we just did out there, Doctor." Jennifer frowned. "What do you mean, sir?" Jake turned away from the window and walked to his desk. On the surface lay the final battle report. 43 Corvin ships destroyed, nearly 2,000 raiders dead. Complete annihilation of an entire fleet in less than 40 minutes. Heroes save people, Jake explained. They rush into burning buildings and pull out survivors. They give their lives to protect others. What we did out there, that wasn't heroism. That was something else entirely. He picked up the report and looked at the numbers again. The efficiency of it still amazed him. No human ships lost. Minimal damage to their own fleet. A perfect military operation executed with surgical precision. "We came here because we heard people screaming for help," Jake continued. "But the moment we saw those Corvin ships circling like vultures, something changed. We didn't just want to rescue the Villani. We wanted to make sure this never happened again." Jennifer was quiet for a moment, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You're talking about the message we sent?" "Exactly." Jake set the report down and looked back out at the debris field. "Every species in this part of the galaxy will hear about what happened here. They'll know that 43 well-armed raider ships attacked one human fleet and none of them survived. They'll wonder what kind of monsters humanity must be to fight like that." The irony wasn't lost on him. The same species that had crossed impossible distances to save strangers had also shown no mercy to their enemies. Humans could be the most compassionate beings in the universe and the most terrifying killers, sometimes in the same hour. "The Villani see us as angels," Jake said. "But the Corvin's friends will see us as demons. And you know what? Both of them, all right." Outside, the last of the survivors was being transferred to safety. Soon the human fleet would leave this system behind, carrying grateful refugees to their new homes. But they would also leave behind something else, a warning written in twisted metal and expanding gas clouds. Word would spread through the criminal underworld faster than light itself. The humans had arrived in this part of the galaxy, and they didn't play by the same rules as everyone else. Cross them, and you might find yourself explaining your actions to creatures who had turned warfare into an art form. In a universe full of predators, Earth had just reminded everyone who really sat at the top of the food chain